Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here and to be presenting about the situation in Georgia. And I mean, we changed many times what to share with you, and I guess I'll be sharing the the story of the history of the resistance as me and my media project. We are actually trying to learn and collect these stories and to analyze this resistance as protest experience since 90s till today. We're building the database where the scholars and all interested people can see what were people actually protesting against, what they were demanding, and how this protest actually were ended. And there has been lots of protests since 1991 till today, and I'm sorry the video was edited to some different scenario, and we started from 1956 protest with the defense of Stalin's cult, but we as Archil mentioned it the other day, I won't talk about it. I'll still start from the Rose Revolution. It's the moment when the Soviet, the Rose Revolution of 2003 was the first massive and hopeful uprising against this fraud, corruption, and the disintegration of the state under Eduard Shevardnadze, who was the former Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs, becoming the second president of Georgia. And it was the moment when citizens poured into the streets, bound by the urgency for change. But the euphoria didn't last really long, because soon after the rise of Mikhail Saakashvili, young, energetic, and pro-Western, frustration began to build against this new regime. And protests in 2007, 2009, 11 erupted in response to police brutality, media censorship, political repression, and deepening economic inequality. 2008 war with Russia only deepened national trauma and fractured public trust. Across the countryside, rural protests and labor strikes spoke of alienation from reforms that seemed to serve markets more than people. By the end of Saakashvili's second term, demonstrations no longer voiced mere democratic aspirations. They become cries of pain. Beneath the facade of modernization, the state had hardened. Protests were beaten. Prisons became sites of systematic torture. Surveillance intensified. The streets filled again, not with the spirit of the new beginning, but with the weight of betrayal. What had once felt like a revolution now felt like a return to violence, to silencing, and to fear. Which leads to a critical pattern we cannot ignore. During these years, large-scale protests were often led by the political opposition. Centralized mobilization, aligned with parties and power blocs, aimed squarely at regime change. The streets swelled not over isolated grievances, but in response to a system perceived as fundamentally broken. From the Rose Revolution to the mass mobilization against Saakashvili's authoritarian drift, the demands were sweeping: free elections, accountable governance, dignity, and the rule of law. Yet these waves were short-lived, reactive and leader-focused. They followed political cycles. Once the moment passed, so did the movement. Occasionally rural or labor protests rose, but they rarely entered national awareness. The state remained the main stage of protests. Mobilization moved to the political calendar. After 2012, protest changed shape. The grievances remained, but new forms emerged, quieter, slower, more focused, and enduring. Movements no longer waited on elections or leaders. They grew from concrete concerns: the destruction of a public square, the sales of a valet, the death of trees or unjust laws, campaigns to occupy one of the central parks in the capital or save the Sadrisi gold mine, which was exploded in the end, which is an archaeological mine recognized as the world's oldest known gold mine. Protests to oppose the Khudoni and Namakhvani gigantic dam construction were not just environmental or urban struggles. They were about sovereignty and memory. These were deep-rooted protests where people camped, built, taught, and resisted for months, sometimes years. Alongside youth movements like White Noise reshaped protests into culture, music, irony, nightlife as tools to resist absolutely repressive drug laws. These forms of resistance were decentralized, leaderless, grounded in everyday life. Their power came not from spectacle, but from persistence. But the government learned. It learned to manage these processes by simulating communication, by faking compromise. During the formalization of drug policy reforms, it staged a retreat, only to later revoke it. Leaders were drawn into negotiations under the illusion of collaboration. That illusion was then shattered deliberately, creating a wave of delusionment too intense that the movement collapsed under its own weight. This government differs from the one before in one particular way. It has mastered the production of illusion. And when illusion breaks, the result of disillusionment does work of repression without visible violence. No crackdown needed, just disappointment. The same strategy has been deployed against recent protests. They'll tire out, they'll run out of energy. That is why today it is essential to find new strategies and to keep them flexible. The system learns fast. It has more resources, it adapts, so resistance must diversify its tools. This government, like the two that preceded it, thrives on fragmentation. It capitalizes on fractured society. Imperial Russia keeps using the same strategy in its republics and national minorities. This is nothing new, and Timothy Snyder also writes about it in his book on tyranny, how the authoritarian regimes fragment societies and isolate individuals to erode trust and severe horizontal ties. To this day, we do not fully understand what produced such destructive forces that communities, once living side by side, turned violently against each other. The ethnic conflicts that tore through Georgia in the early 90s were not isolated outbreaks of hatred or mere accidents of history. They were outcomes of a deeper, longer process, one that has been carefully cultivated over decades. Fragmentation was not just a consequence of war, it was its condition and cause. It was systematically imposed, first under Imperial Russian rule, then reinforced during Soviet governance, and later reproduced by post-Soviet elites. It was built into the very design of governance: autonomy without real sovereignty, cohabitation without shared citizenship, division without reconciliation. Empire maintained its control not through brute force alone, but by weakening horizontal ties between neighbors, ethnic groups, regions, so that no common front could emerge against centralized power. Understanding fragmentation not as an unfortunate byproduct, but as an intentional political technology helps explain why even today trust remains fragile, why protests must not only challenge power but rebuild social bonds that have been eroded for generations. In the vast and impassioned protests of 2024, it is crucial to listen to the voices of those who understand this pain not only intellectually but viscerally, At the core of this movement are people who consciously avoid the charge of an alienating language of party politics and ideology. Their tone is quieter, grounded in principles and morality, but no less determined or forceful. "We will not forget false witnesses," shouted a young woman leading the march from the public broadcaster to Tbilisi Central Avenue. Her voice carried not just through the street, but into memory. She has recognized a police officer who had recently testified falsely against prisoners of conscience. In that moment, she did not call for revenge. She named the truth, a quiet but resolute act of reckoning. Later that same night, another young activist turned to me and said softly, "Still, we have to keep close. We should keep everybody close." I knew exactly what she meant. Georgia is small. Social ties run deep, across generations, across pain, across political lines. In a country fractured repeatedly by violence, repression, and betrayal, resistance is not built through declarations alone. It emerges through relationships, through remembering who stood where, who kept silent, who spoke up, who showed up. These protests are not just about opposition. They are about repair. And repair begins not with slogans, but with weaving back together or torn social fabric. And still, something new breaks through. In the screams of the young, there is a clarity that refuses to be distracted by the usual internal enemies or the familiar rituals of betrayal and blame. There is something else articulated in the popular chants heard every evening, "Till the end." In Georgia, we've never truly gone all the way. In the past, "till the end" meant a change in government, not in ideas, values, and principles. Today, this phrase holds a different meaning. It signals a deeper transformation. People are now demanding institutions, a solid foundation for the state, a fair court system. "No justice, no peace," they shout. "Police everywhere, justice nowhere," we hear every evening. The French revolutionary slogan, "Liberty, Equality, Solidarity," has found a new local echo in Georgia. It now blends with the will of people. But there is a shadow haunting us. We are caught in a long, grinding process, one where we keep repeating ourselves, circling the same terrain. As it is impossible to turn a drawn-out struggle into an endless field of experiments, we have to stand in the same place, shout the same words. Through when resistance settles into a pattern, it risks becoming no more than a performance, a ritual of defeat disguised as persistence, a gesture of exhaustion rather than transformation. In recent years, protesters have turned openly against politicians. Opposition leaders are booed, blocked, told, "This is not your place, power belongs to the people." This is another challenge. No political force can carry the protests forward. There is no strong, coherent alternative to build upon the public's rage. For years, each government has sought not to just suppress dissent, but to clear the entire field, to erase the political itself. We are now facing these consequences. But still, two new political actors have emerged in the last year. One is now a registered party, the other is still a movement. An uneasy but vital coalition of scientists, lawyers, activists, and researchers. They are something new. So we wait not passively but with strain. We wait for new voices, new forms of political life that might rise from the street but not remain trapped there. The experience of this sustained and broken protest has forged a new kind of solidarity, one that is different. Communities for action are formed. To counter propaganda, to reach out for the local communities against the gigantic dam projects constructions, to help out workers in the mines, and so on. Today, all prisoners of conscience refuse to plead guilty. They do not negotiate. They demand justice. Independent media openly declare their refusal to comply, rejecting registration and defying every unlawful law, a stance that exposes the absurdity of the system itself. The vast majority of the independent media now operate voluntarily. The same with NGOs. They too continue their work despite increasing pressure. And beyond the actual protest, we have also our personal resistance spaces. Just yesterday, a prisoner of conscience was declared innocent by court, a rare precedent-setting decision. But first thing I thought was, we better be careful. This cannot become the seed of a new illusion. Because what the regime fights is not simply protest, it targets belief itself. And by doing so, it erodes courage, trust, and the will to act. What is ultimately under attack is the belief that change is possible, and that it can be shaped, managed, and sustained. Not just a fleeting eruption, but a process. That collective will can push for transformation and then carry it forward, refusing to let it be absorbed, stalled, or undone. When belief is broken, not only action stops, imagination withers. And that is the real aim of today's repression, to make it seem that like nothing ever truly changes. Today, this is what we aim to defend, not just our rights or voices, but our capacity and the skill to imagine otherwise. As only through imagination we begin to believe, and only through belief we start to act. And that is what makes this resistance dangerous. Not its slogans, but its dreams.